All right, Robs. We're back with a new book. Unexpected book. Picked this up today at a thrift store for a quarter. I saw it last week, but I didn't get it because I didn't recognize these creepy eyed paintings. You've seen them before if you've. Yeah, these aren't the ones. What the hell are they? It's those big eye ones. There's a butt. There they are, the big eyed children who are on the front cover. There's some. They're actually worth money now. The original lithographs. There's one of them right there. Apparently, they're usually of waifs with huge eyeballs. Apparently, Keane did not actually paint these paintings. His wife did, and he took the credit and became a big celebrity. So it's kind of weird. The World of Keane by Walter Keane. Our Children. The World of Keane. Copyright 1983. You can see it's signed by Walter Keane. And the funny, ironic part is he writes in the beginning, Women and Wanderings. How trite is the cliche behind every successful man there is a woman. How few men are willing to admit to the truth of this saying, although they realize its applicability in their own life to their own lives. I not only acknowledge the truth of the cliche, but I also change woman to women. If any man can thank the women of his life for facilitating this success, I can. Yeah, because his wife was at the time apparently doing all the paintings. But we may get to that. Preface. Whatever happened to Walter Keane? Maybe I should turn this fan down here. Son of a bitch. There we go. Maybe you won't blow the pages so much. Thanks, buddy. Alright. Now I can steam to death. No, it's still on there. And it's blowing. Whatever happened to Walter Keane? Painter of the lost waifs with large soulful eyes. This is a question I had often asked myself. In the 50s and 60s, Walter Keane was the rage. Paintings, lithographs, postal and Christmas cards of his children as quickly were purchased as they could be made available. What do you got, Bacon Man? From San Francisco to New York, Keane was a most admired and desirable household word. The painter himself was highly visible. Frequent appearances on talk shows with Jack Parr, Merv Griffin, Hugh Downs, and Ernie Ford revealed the flamboyant, self-assured, witty man. What would you do if I showed up with a little creature who is basically a mini human, and I showed it to you before smacking it into paste in one swoop? Why do people come to these chats with these stupid questions? I would fling you into outer space like somebody should have done already before you wrote that rubbish. Articles in major newspapers and magazines throughout the world chronicled an artist whose motivation to paint was propelled by the lost children of the world. Photos and stories of Walter at his exhibitions in Paris, Tokyo, London, Paris, and Brussels depicted a prolific, talent seemingly indefatigable in his ability to create captivating children. All different, but all distinctly Keane. Then overnight, Walter disappeared. What happened to him is a rare and in itself remarkable portrait of an altogether human man. I met Walter Keane in February of 1983. When he introduced himself, I could hardly believe my good fortune. As a student at the University of California in Berkeley some 20 years before, I had admired the wonderful waifs of the Keane paintings. Three of my friends and I often went to Broadway in San Francisco to browse through the Keane Art Gallery. I gotta do something about this wind blowing on me. What would you do if I showed up with a little creature? Get out of my life. What would you do if you had the brain the size of a little creature? And you do. Three of my friends and I often went to Broadway in San Francisco to browse through the Keane Art Gallery. We dreamed of the day we might pool our mutual savings to buy just one painting. Our plan was to rotate it among our four apartments, with each of us having the painting for a 3 month a year period. None of this idea materialized, but I never forgot the excitement and joy of the gallery and the artistic masterpieces inside. Little did I know then that 2 decades later I would find myself in a writing course as a student with Walter Keane. When I learned that the quiet, pensive man sitting next to me was indeed the painter, I was delighted and intensely curious. Did I dare to ask where he had been for those past years, and why he was currently enrolled in a class entitled Writing the Novel? I did question Walter. Our subsequent conversations centered about many themes of his life, all of which unfold marvelously in the following pages of this book. The autobiographical work highlights an immensely exciting life, replete with every conceivable emotion and experience. There is romance with three wives and several lovers throughout the world. There is adventure from Walter's arrest in a San Francisco bar to near escape from death in the Bay and in the South China Sea. There is political intrigue from the painter's thwarted efforts to visit Moscow to his rewarding friendships with Prince Fazel and Madame Chiang Kai-shek. What a great friendship that must have been. And there is the complex and compelling existence of the artist, illuminated by anecdotes about Picasso and Gonet, with detailed accounts of how a great painting is conceived and executed. Yet to me, the most fascinating aspect of Walter's life is the motif of the lost children. Walter Keane loves and understands children. His paintings reveal a deep compassion for the human condition of the lost children. The gently falling tears on the sad face of the child in happy mask, unhappy boy, the loosely cupped hands of the little girl. In the alley of the first grail, the protectively resolute embrace of the baby by her older sister. In the caretaker, the wispy, unkept hair of a pensive, the little thinker. But first and foremost in these and other works are the ever haunting eyes of the children, which seem to reflect a world of wonder and often of fear. Walter's inspiration for the Lost Children paintings began in post World War II Germany. The hunger, despair, and deprivation of the orphaned, homeless waifs making their way through divested Berlin left a lasting impression. The impact of these children changed the entire course of Keane's life. What had been a bold budding talent became an artistic genius with a purpose and goal, uncommon among human beings. Yeah, things is the proper word. Walter's life became a driving need to reach the world for the lost children, to portray their suffering on canvas, in hope that political leaders would remember forever. To quote the artist himself, my painting, Our Children, was created with the hope it would have it would hang one eventful day at the summit meeting when the world leaders pondering peace or war would be reminded for whom they are negotiating. This idea is embodied monumentally in three Keane paintings. Our Children, now in the permanent collection at the United Nations in New York, Tomorrow Forever on exhibit in Europe, and Peace on Earth in the Museum of Modern Art in Tokyo, Japan. Walter Keane, the man, is the living example of the sensitivity to children depicted in his paintings. The proud father of Susan, also an accomplished artist, Chantel, age 12, and Sasha, age 10. Walter is an adoring parent. Whether walking with them on the beach, playing chess with them, or just talking with his children, Walter's soft spoken understanding of what it means to be young inspires the respect and love of his offspring. My 10-year-old son Trevor and my 5-year-old daughter Tasha frequently visit the artist in his cottage studio overlooking the blue Pacific in La Jolla. How he them, inquiring about their activities and making them feel very. Now at home, they are there under the watchful eyes of the waifs that chronicle the history of a master painter. The news is good for all lovers of Walter Keane. He is alive and well presently in California. He is painting, and also his artistic efforts are bringing forth his magnificent signed, numbered, limited editions, which will be available soon. Personally, I am the proud owner of Walter's lithograph, Sunday in Chinatown, which hangs in my living room. As I look at the red cable car framed by colorful Chinese letters, lanterns, and winsome, wide-eyed children holding balloons, I am reminded of our mutual love for San Francisco and the lost waifs of the world. More important, my lithograph and all other Keane creations are a permanent monument to a great artist and an equally fine human being, truly a beautiful man, Terry Taylor. And I'm going to guess that Terry. No, it's not. I thought it was Terry, but it's Tracy. All right, so on we move. Chapter 1 Grandmother. Of the many women I have known, the one who mattered most was my grandmother. Both lovely and wise, she changed the course of my life many times in many ways. Hannah Marie Fredriksson was born in Malmö, Sweden in 1866. Married at 19, she was to have 7 children before she and her husband migrated to America. My mother and the others grew up in a rural area outside Lincoln, Nebraska. Grandfather, who had been trained as an engineer, found work with the Rock Island Railroad. Clever and intuitive as she was, grandmother could not shield her beautiful daughter, my mother, from the risks of living in the early days of the 20th century. Gentle, artistic Alma Christine was a virtual slave from the day she married William Robert Keane, a man born in the same year as her mother. Father was a widower whose wife had died at the birth of their 4th child. In rapid succession, he and my mother had 10 children of their own. That's insane. At our house, the ironing board was always up. With 16 mouths to feed each day, my mother had little time to spend with me. The 11th child from the top, I was a shy, introverted, frail, and skinny child with blue eyes, white silk hair, and always dressed in hand-me-downs. It was easy to become lost in an intricate, bewildering maze of brothers and sisters, some of whom were already budding musicians, writers, or painters. All of us vied with one another for attention and affection. My dad was from the Diocese of Killaloe, parish of Nenagh, Nina, I don't know how to say it, Ireland. A buggy maker in his native land, he adapted to a new environment by making convertible tops for cars and ultimately by establishing his own factory, thus becoming a subcontractor to General Motors. Like many Irish immigrants who had fled the potato famine, he attempted to overcome the native prejudice by pretending to be an American. Naively, he listed his birthplace as Louisville, Kentucky, when he applied for a loan to expand his company. Very likely, the banker was impressed enough by the applicant's power and drive to overlook his antecedents. Physically, Dad was a big man in top condition. I can visualize him today with his red hair and freckles. He worked long hours at his company and had other interests as well. When he died at age 89, he had the reputation of having kept three young women as his mistresses. The story was that he died in bed making love with them. Maybe legend, maybe truth, who can say? It remains that I saw very little of him. When I was really hungry for a little daddy love, I would watch for him to walk up the long, winding driveway. When he reached the clearing, I would run to him and shout, "Daddy, Daddy." He would pick me up, hold me tightly in his neat, near crushing arms, and give me a big kiss as he carried me up the driveway. Sometimes he would reach into his pocket and give me a nickel for tomorrow. Once inside the house, however, there were a dozen others competing for his affection. I was again the lost one, unable to hold his attention. I never spent the nickels. They went into my little bank, treasures to me. The hugs were an even greater prize. Perhaps once a week, if I were lucky, I would climb into Daddy's rocking chair and he would rock me to sleep. When he carried me up the stairs to my bed to tuck me in, I would throw my arms around his neck, holding tightly and whisper to him in my sleepy little voice that I loved the beautiful songs he sang to me when he rocked me. We said our prayers together. As Dad turned out my light, he would throw me another goodnight kiss and convey his wish for happy dreams. The rocking chair and the driveway embraces are my most salient memories of Dad in our family home. Mother went off to the Lutheran church while Daddy attended his Catholic church. We children were split on the religious issue. My older brothers were indoctrinated into the Catholic Church, whereas I identified more with my grandmother, who was a Lutheran and very active in her church. Perhaps the Lutheran Church was the only thing that mother felt truly belonged to her. She would sit with me while grandmother sang in the choir. Church provided her only respite from an endless round of cooking, mending, and cleaning. Like my brothers and sisters, I was assigned to daily tasks, rotating from bed making to cleaning bathrooms to peeling potatoes. Once a week, when mother would go grocery shopping, I would accompany her. I pulled my wagon with one hand and hung on to her with the other. This was always a happy time for me. When my duties were completed, I would often escape to the noisy turmoil of the house to explore the countryside. One day, at the age of 4, going on 5, I wandered aimlessly through the backwoods until I became lost. Tired, I searched for some familiar landmark. At last, I came to a clearing and saw a creek with a narrow bridge leading to a home. Joyfully, I recognized the cottage of my grandmother, which I visited every Sunday with my family. It had always been a haven for me, and on that fateful day, it became even more significant. I knocked on the door, and my world changed. "Grandma," I called out. "My little Walter," she replied. She leaned over with her arms reaching out to me, clinging to her. I locked my hands behind her neck to keep from sliding off her big bosom. She began to hug and kiss me. I have just made some oatmeal cookies. Come into the kitchen with me and I will get you some with a glass of milk, she offered. Then she paused and looked down for a moment. For my beautiful little grandson, she added. Grandmother had time for me. It was time not diluted by my strong, creative, bossy big brothers and sisters. After I had finished the milk and cookies, I turned my attention to a special project of grandmother's. I have been painting some roses, she said. As I admired her artistry, I noticed that she was arranging a second easel beside hers. Grandmother then showed me how to draw a rose and how to make the paint from the tubes become a flower. When we had completed our painting together, I could almost smell the aroma of the rose. After this initial visit on my own to grandmother's, I went often. One day, as I sat in front of my easel with a rose nearby and a brush in hand, grandmother said with a smile, My little Walter, your own creativity is beginning to appear in those brush strokes. Grandmother was not only an artist, but she was also a fine musician who played many instruments. As an active member of the Lutheran Church, she sang in the choir and occasionally played the organ. In the years that followed, she taught me to cook, to embroider, to sew and darn socks. Every Sunday morning, hello, Robs. Every Sunday afternoon was party time at grandmother's house. All of her children and grandchildren gathered. There were nearly 40 of us. We had a family orchestra. Uncle Walter and Uncle Paul were artists who painted in grandmother's studio on Sunday. I joined them and learned a great deal from watching their artistic effects. What you got, bruv? Or efforts, pardon. My uncle Rudy was the drummer of the band, in the band, and taught me how to beat the drums. Aunt Dora played the fiddle. There were often 6 to 12 people playing at a time. They played mostly folk music, which I learned to love since I heard no other. During these Sunday gatherings, Dad and Uncle Carl made 100 quarts of home brew to drink the following Sunday. It's a lot of booze. Aunt Agnes, and cousin Jim recited poetry while we drank, danced, and painted all day. During the festivities one Sunday, I whispered to grandmother, Do you like Aunt Agnes's poetry? With a mischievous smile, she replied, Little Walter, poetry for me must have rhythm like music. I'm afraid that Agnes is still searching for the beat. Grandmother's sense of humor only added to her near perfection in my eyes. Something wonderful was always happening when I was with her, laughing, playing, or just talking together. We were companions, completely at ease with one another. Holding me in her arms one day, she said, My little Walter, my grandson, you are my dearest friend. Those were the most important words I ever heard. Today, we know the significance of creating self-esteem within a child. Psychologists, counselors, and educators agree that the single most important ingredient in the formation of a happy, healthy child is a positive self-concept. I am certain that my grandmother knew instinctively what more learned people were just beginning to discover. When times were difficult and the stress was overwhelming, grandmother's confidence in my abilities enabled me not only to survive but also to triumph. Her spirit was with me in 1935 when I left Nebraska at the age of 18 with one small suitcase to travel to California. She inspired me to work my way through college and to obtain a degree in business administration in Berkeley, California. As I became affluent in money and property from my real estate and construction business, I never doubted that grandmother would have been proud of my achievements. Yet, somewhere along the way, I had not been true to myself and to the destiny that would bring the kind of fulfillment my grandmother had envisioned for me. While at the top of my success, I began to have severe stomach pains. Several doctors found nothing physically wrong and recommended that I see a psychiatrist. The pains became more excruciating every day. Following several visits with the psychiatrist, I felt no relief. I discontinued the consultations. With personal profits increasing daily, I nevertheless felt more plagued by business concerns and problems. Tension mounted within me. The stomach pains were nearly unbearable. Like an explosion, the burnout overcame me. While walking in the quietness of my garden one morning, I looked at the shimmering sunlight burning off the morning mist as I listened to the birds sing, staring fixed-eyed and watching them fly freely away. I lifted my arms toward them and cried out, "Please wait, I am one of you." I closed my eyes, then came the spark. My dazed, feverish request was answered. I realized that my innate artistic talent had been locked in my brain and my body for all these years. Feeling a sudden strength and conviction, I knew that a new life had begun. My obsessive need for possessions was broken. In that moment of ultimate reality, I felt grandmother's warm embrace encompassing my total being, just as it had that first day when the lost little boy found himself at her door. With the decision to exchange a life of business, ambition, and respectability for one of artistic endeavor and adventure, I became a different person, and my stomach pains vanished forever. And this is The Life or The World of Keane by Walter Keane, the guy who drew those weird, big-eyed. Well, he supposedly did, but it turned out his wife was doing it. Barbara and Paris, Chapter 2. At least these chapters are relatively short. Barbara in Paris. Nowadays, a career change is common and even expected and accepted. When I decided to give up a lucrative real estate and construction business for an artist's life in the 40s, I shocked and scandalized some of my friends and family members. Fortunately, the woman in my life at this time was Barbara. She, like my grandmother, was far ahead of her contemporaries in terms of realizing her own potential and inspiring those close to her to do the same. I met Barbara while working at a summer job in Berkeley. A student at the University of California, she was poised, intelligent, and ambitious. After a courtship of 13 months, we were married. Our first years together were mixed moments of bliss and frenetic activity. Having come from a family of illustrious educators, clergymen, and doctors, Barbara was not content to be a housewife. Following her graduation from the university, she continued her studies at Berkeley. I admired her strong will and desire to better herself in a time when few women pursued such lofty goals. In retrospect, I wonder how much psychological support I gave her in those difficult days of research projects and papers, exams, and dissertations. She was, however, so single minded in the pursuit of a PhD that I hardly had time to encourage or discourage her. I recall my desperation at one point when we had seen each other only a few minutes in several days. I finally made a date with her 4 days in advance. We managed to meet for lunch one Friday at Spenger's, the famous fish, fish restaurant on San Francisco Bay. Afterward, we returned to the university and I walked her to class. I was more aware of Barbara's absences from home because I was constantly at work in our house, in the small studio I had set up. My schedule was equally as hectic as Barbara's, although we were often busy at different times. That was the beginning of a long distance marriage with an extraordinary lady, a liberated woman. During the many years of our frequent separations, she never attempted to stifle my creativity or to make claims on my time and energy. Similarly, I tried very hard not to interfere with her activities and ambitions. She never argued or fought. There was too much mutual admiration and respect between us. Somehow we could not get synchronized in our personal relationship because each of us was so dedicated to a profession. When I craved a back rub or a drink, Barbara was at school. If I became involved in an all night painting project, I was oblivious to Barbara's presence or to her needs. We were like two ships on the same sea, sailing in different courses toward different destinations. Throughout our marriage, Barbara never questioned my need to paint or to travel away from her for long periods of time. In 1946, I convinced her to accompany me to Paris. I knew that my artistic career must include study in France, so I arranged to take classes at the École des Beaux-Arts. I don't know how to say French words. We rented an apartment on the Avenue des Versailles, which boasted a view of the Seine. Barbara temporarily put aside her studies in California to be with me. She had planned to attend school in Paris, and to work in the design house of a courtier. Our plans, our plans, did not materialize as we had hoped. Paris was cold, and Barbara became ill there. One day, when I returned home from class, she greeted me and said, "I'm going home tomorrow. Paris is your new world. Stay and enjoy it. Do your thing. Come home when you want. I will be there if you need." I replied, "Keep a light in the window." In Paris, I pursued my art classes vigorously. My first live painting course was a painful experience. I was a shy young man from California, and I had never before seen a live female model unclothed. I simply could not bring myself to draw a nude full front. I learned to do nudes all right, but they were invariably reclining figures who were posturing. Shortly after the class began, the instructor inquired about my preoccupation. I answered lamely, "I am fascinated by backbones." Paris can work remarkable changes in a young man's fancy. Several weeks later, after a few flagons of vin rouge, I moved my easel around to the front. I had come from the other side of the world to discover life and to create it anew. How fortunate I was to be able to study art in Paris, headquarters of the masters. Still a youth in much of my thinking and many of my feelings, I had achieved what so many young artists aspire to do: live and learn in the art capital of the world. Soon after grandmother awakened the artist's yearning within me, I had begun to dream of following in the footsteps of my Swedish grandfather. And, and there's nude posterior oil 16 by 30, painted in 1946. In the footsteps of my Swedish grandfather and two uncles who had studied in Paris. Now that vision had begun to materialize. Another of my art instructors explained that present day painters were still within the grip of the post Cézanne revolution. I learned to have great respect for the achievements of French modernism and became totally engrossed in mastering its lessons and techniques. As I painted, I felt an overwhelming emotional involvement, filling my being with passion. I slept little, indeed. I needed little sleep. I was so proud of my brush calloused hand. Suddenly, life had become exhilarating and exciting. The city of Paris is in itself artistically stimulating. Although she is 1,000 years old, Paris remains forever youthful. She is so gay, bright, whimsical, filled with uninhibited curiosity, hungry for adventure, and responsive to life. I was compelled to become part of her perpetually festive ambiance. Hours of painting, drinking, and loving filled the days and nights. Like Gertrude Stein, I began to feel that America is my country, but Paris is my hometown. My particular niche of the city was the section called, and I should know this because I've come across it in about two or three books, and Montmartre, Maman, I don't know how to say it. In the artist's quarter there, I set up my studio and a bed. The sights, sounds, odors, and movements of life in the cobblestone streets of. Damn, I know how to say this. I learned it from that one book. Montmartre. I'll just say it like that so it sounds like I'm a fucking Charlie Brown character. Inspired my creative abilities to transfer all of these activities to my canvas. One of my most treasured paintings during the first year in Paris is, oh no, a street scene redolent of the massive architectural qualities of Cezanne and the lucid recentenarianism of Utrillo. It displays a powerful use of diagonals in an exaggerated perspective that drives vivid blocks of color into focus. Incredible not only for its solidity, but also for its variations within somehow unyielding planes. So engrossed was I in my new life as a painter that I had hardly noticed the results and ravages of the Second World War. When one is totally involved in a career that gives him great happiness and joy, there is little awareness of the world outside. Here I was living and studying in a country that had been occupied by the Germans, and yet I was oblivious to the atrocities of the conflict. How easy it would have been for me to stay there in Montmartre among the nude models and other successful and aspiring painters. Once again, however, the spirit of my grandmother moved me to go elsewhere. She seemed to invade my consciousness with a message that something vital and important was waiting for me in another part of Europe. As always, she was right. The next 6 months were to change my life. There's Montmartre. 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 I don't know how to say it. Berlin. He's going to Berlin. Oh, that's right. That's where he sees the big-eyed children. 3. Chapter 3, Berlin. After 1 year in art school, I left Paris he stuttered, and set out on a sketching trip across Europe. Once outside France's great pleasure dome, I began to see the impact war had made on Europe, not merely in terms of physical suffering and the anguish of loss, but also of sheer assault of the human psyche. Germany, particularly bombed Berlin, a theater of blood, was like hell on earth. Berlin was devastated, appalled at the destruction. That's it. Appalled at the destruction. Shelter was the basements of bombed out buildings. Electric power was gone. Water was gone. Berlin was a land of broken bodies and broken minds. Berlin became prehistoric. Survivors were like cavemen. I could hardly recall the old world city as it had once been. The city lay in such ruin, its famed marble columns, enormous bronze statues, and imposing edifices had been pulverized. Children scavenged through the filthy remnants of the adults' war. Occupation of Berlin by 4 different powers, Great Britain, Russia, France, and the United States, had already begun to take its toll. The Germans were most hated by the French, and the Russians, whose nations had been occupied by the Nazis. In Russia, Hitler's armies had done inestimable damage. Consequently, Germans in the post-war Russian zone lived in great fear. Food and housing were almost non-existent in the early years of partition. Sanitation was poor. Stories of rape, beatings, and killings were rampant. Soon after landing at Tempelhof Airdome, I met a German woman who recounted her terror when the Russians marched into Berlin. A group of soldiers had sighted her and her 12-year-old daughter as they fled into the remains of a church. 9 of the soldiers pursued them. The mother's passionate pleas for her daughter's safety were to no avail. Both were brutally raped by all 9 soldiers. The young girl died as a result of her ordeal. Her head had been bashed in. Yeah, the Russians were brutal. They did not care about the Holocaust victims. The Germans themselves were perplexing. None of them was a Nazi. All of them had rejoiced on May 8th, the evening of Germany's surrender to the Allies. In the well-kept little town of Dachau, the people knew of the concentration camp there, but they had no idea of the extermination of the prisoners. Amid the grim events of post-war Berlin, I tried to remain detached from the political games and rationale of the adults. I was not a war correspondent. I was an artist. My attention focused on the most tragic victims of the conflict, the frightened, neglected, and often abused children. During those intense days, I made my way through the rubble of the city in search of the lost waifs left homeless and parentless by the war. Never once did I fear for my life. At the time, one could pass freely among all sectors of Berlin. I was soon recognized as a harmless artist who carried food, clothing, combs, and toothbrushes to give to the children. A page of sketches from 1946, entitled simply Berlin Children, presents, as my words could never do, the vision that came to me at that time. There it is. The prelude to all those big eyes, at least according to him. These drawings contain works done rapidly as I viewed children on the verge of starvation. Their jaws slack, their hair thinning, their expressions terrified, and over again, their dark and hollow eyes revealing more human tragedy. Nothing would ever be the same for me. These tragic victims would ultimately cause me to search the world for other lost children. This would become a mission that stirred my blood so intensely that I would eventually paint my masterwork, Tomorrow Forever. At the time, I was too moved, too shaken by the spectacle of these offspring of war to do more than capture a scattered few in quick sketches. They in turn did etchings of a sort. They etched themselves indelibly upon my mind and my very soul. Hunger was constant and never fully relieved on any day. It left the children virtually fleshless. There was a life of fear. Theirs was a life of fear. That fear filled their eyes, causing one to overlook the rags and the dirt. Unforgettable as were the eyes of these small, bomb-created derelicts, made an indelible impression. Almost every little girl mothered a younger sibling. Another Berlin drawing I called Caretaker dramatically and poignantly records this sad phenomenon. Like many a pre-teenage girl of poverty in post-war Berlin, this child this child found herself in the role of mother to an infant brother. These child mothers, so much in need of maternal care themselves, turned their own need into a touching maternalism. They foraged for their siblings, often enduring hunger, to ease the pangs of the little ones. The girl who is the subject of my painting. Oh, there it is. The Caretaker. And there's Survival on oil canvas. Again, it is claimed that he did not paint any of it, but his wife did, so who knows. Survival is the first child. Why did it just seemingly skip over what the text was? The girl who is the subject of my painting, Survival, is the first child ever to appear on a canvas of mine. She, with her expression of innocent bewilderment in the midst of the Holocaust, of war, marks a turning point in my career. The flaming horror around her is engraved forever on my mind in a lonesome thing, while this nameless child occupies a special shrine in my heart. Berlin in 1946 was the catalyst I needed after the splashy gaiety of Paris. Something impelled me to stay. The thousands upon thousands of lost children. This guy's just the greatest person on earth. Nothing in my life until then or since has ever made such an impact as the sight of those children fighting over garbage. As if goaded by a kind of frantic despair, I sketched these dirty, ragged little victims of war with their bruised, lacerated minds and bodies, their matted hair and runny noses. Here my life as a painter began in earnest. Paris had been only a light-hearted apprenticeship. The insane and human cruelty inflicted upon these children cut deeply into my being. From that moment on, I painted the lost children with the eyes that forever retained their haunting and haunted quality. Children who are dependent upon adults for nourishment, protection, shelter, guidance, and love have always been the most tragic victims of war. The unthinkable cruelty suffered by these children would have ashamed an Assyrian warlord. The armistice brought them little relief. I asked the German man about the children. He interrupted my questioning to say, "Terrible, terrible, there is nobody to watch them. They are the worst kind of thieves." While painting the child of survival, I grew increasingly disturbed. I wondered why I was so disheartened. Was I sad because this child was so many years ahead of her time? I think my despair stemmed from the realization that she and the others were not searching so much for food as they were for love. The poor, poor children. Sleepless nights, wave-filled dreams, and depression had totally consumed me, as if my mind had gone berserk. How could God allow these children to suffer and die like this? He must not be a good God. My commitment was made because I now had a clear vision of the future. I returned to Paris, my studio in Montmartre, still don't know how to say it, and the Beaux Arts School. It was 1947. We're reading The World of Keane by Walter Keane, who has claimed, "Whoa, don't fall down, clock, you son of a bitch. You little bastard, son of a bitch." It's claimed that he didn't do any of these drawings or paintings, and his wife did. But nobody knows the real story. Chapters are really short, so this one, of course, is long. What am I on? 50 minutes? Let's do it. Let's do it. Colette and Renee, Chapter 4. I arrived in Paris with feelings of numbness mixed with a sense of purpose. I was single-minded about capturing on canvas the despair and the destitution of the Berlin orphans. Yet, I was lonely and lost. I missed Barbara. I wanted to have a child whom I could love and cherish. I wanted to prove that childhood can be a wonderful experience if one has the nurturing and encouragement necessary. Again, my thoughts turned to grandmother. How special she had been. Now I was faced with a dilemma. Should I lose the momentum and direction I had acquired in Berlin by returning to California where Barbara and I might start a family? Or should I remain in Europe with the subjects who were my inspiration? Obsessed with the vision of the wartime waifs, I opted for loneliness and dedication to my painting. That decision paved the way for the first and perhaps the fondest love affair of my life. It mattered not that Colette was a prostitute. It mattered not that Colette was a prostitute, for she had chosen her profession out of necessity. She was one of the most giving, loving individuals I have ever known. Her daughter Renee became a Keane painting, and the two of them became my Paris family. I first saw Colette one day while I was sitting in a sidewalk cafe reading the Herald Tribune and watching the passers-by on the Champs Elysees. I recognized I recognized Jean, a streetwalker who had often stopped to chat with the artist at work. Beside her was a woman I had never seen before. She had a thin face, full lips, black hair to her shoulders, large dark eyes, a gracious walk with long legs and a slender body. She looked very French with small breasts, a narrow waist, and a nicely shaped derriere. Her face was cleanly washed and without makeup. I assumed she was a woman of the streets since she seemed to know Jean. Once or twice she appeared to look back at me. Thought that's who he was talking about. All right. Once or twice she appeared to look back at me, but her face remained blank. Soon she was gone. 3 weeks passed and I had given up the thought of ever seeing this lovely creature again. I continued to paint frenetically and had just delivered one of my works to a buyer in the George 5, or is it George V? George V Hotel when I saw the lady who had come to haunt my dreams. She was entering the hotel with a man. He was very tan, handsome, well dressed, and old enough to be her father. I calculated that she would be out in 1 hour. The wait began. From a cafe across the street, I sat and watched for her exit. 2 hours and 15 minutes later, she emerged alone. I shouted to the waiter, "I'll be back in 1 minute." Darting between cars with their horns honking and drivers swearing at me, I got across Avenue George D. It's got to be George V. And ran to her. In the last few yards, she saw me approaching. She stopped and started walking away. "Mademoiselle, please. I've been hoping to meet you since the first day I saw you, standing with Jean on the Champs Elysees." I invited her to return with me to the cafe across the street and join me in a glass of wine. Perhaps she saw me as another potential customer, but what difference did it make? At least she agreed to join me. "My name is Colette," she introduced herself. "I'm Walter Keane." "I know," she amazed me by saying. "I've seen you painting all over Paris. At Montmartre, La Tour, Notre Dame, in the park. It was only last August you were painting a little girl at Port Grimaud, in the artist area on the left, entering St. Tropez. Or is it Tropez? Tropes? Other times I seen you drinking at Les Senequiter. Les Senequiter? I don't know how to fucking say these French words. If all the tables were full, you would walk over to Papagayo. You picked the best bistros in the village. And here I thought it was I who discovered you. What a gracious and beautiful lady you are. One day I would like to have you model for me." "Who, me?" she exclaimed. "As a child of the streets of Paris? Oh, you do know my paintings." "Mais oui, Monsieur Walter." She called me by my name for the first time. Taking a photograph from her purse, she showed me a picture of a little girl. "Renee, my daughter," Colette explained. "She's 6.5. She is beautiful," I marveled. "Her eyes. She is a Keane painting. When may I see her?" "I'm on my way to her school to pick her up now. Come with me if you like." "I'd love to." I rose quickly, signaling for the check. I was as intrigued by the potential of the charming young model as I was enamored by her beautiful mother. Quickly I took Colette's arm. There was a taxi in the middle of the Champs Elysees. This guy don't know how to use a punctuation. A punctuation? She entered first, so gracefully pulling her dress up to panty level, fully exposed her beautiful legs. I sat to her right, gazing into her large, expressive eyes. Her lips were moist, free of lipstick, her clear skin, her beauty and freshness I wanted to capture on canvas. We reached the school almost too soon. She darted inside the building and soon returned with a happy, laughing little girl in a beige skirt and jacket. "What a beautiful picture," I said aloud. mother and child. Why don't we go by my studio so you and Renee can see it? I suggested. Renee was fascinated. I gave her a pad and pencil to draw a few things, which I set out for her. I had painted the dog in one of my works, and Renee said, I'll draw the dog. There's a bowl of fresh fruit, Renee. Just what you like, I offered. I hope to make her comfortable in the new atmosphere of my studio. Colette and I had a bottle of Montrachet wine. Then I set up. It's an odd place to put a capitalization. Then I set up a canvas and invited Renee to pose. She eagerly agreed, but continued to move and talk with her mother. This would never do. I handed Colette 20 francs and suggested that she go to the store. This is kind of creeper territory here. Perhaps they would have milk or ice cream for Renee. I walked to the door with Colette and whispered, Please give us 30 minutes alone before you return. That sounds really bad. This gave me time to explain to Renee how necessary it was for a model to sit quietly and not move. Soon she was posing like a pro and appearing fascinated by her role as a model. The door opened and Renee jumped up and said, Mama, I have been modeling for Monsieur Keane. Colette smiled with pleasure, giving Renee a gentle hug and a kiss. Eager to continue, I said, While Colette prepares us all a sandwich and a salad, let's paint a little longer. I called out to Colette, While you're in the kitchen, open another bottle of wine and relax. Enjoy it. Colette, who had never been to my studio before, was able to prepare a lovely lunch, though she was not familiar with the kitchen. Soon we three sat down. As we held hands and I said grace and added, Thank you, Father, for this beautiful day we are sharing, for new faces and new friends. The next day, Colette arrived as planned, dropped Renee off, and left to do some errands. She returned in about 2 hours. Renee and I had only one 5-minute rest period. She was a natural model and seemed to come alive in this new setting. Colette brought some wonderful thin sliced veal, mushrooms, and some fresh spinach and asparagus. The lady of the street was a gourmet in the kitchen. We had a delightful dinner with candlelight, wine, and good conversation. Renee told funny things that happened at school. The hours passed quickly. Soon it was Renee's bedtime. Same time tomorrow, I said as I walked down the street with them to hail a taxi, waving goodbye. The next day, Colette came alone to my studio. The taxi was waiting below. Renee had a little fever when I picked her up at school, she explained. Let's wait for 2 days and give her a rest. Of course, I agreed. She gave me her address and suggested that I come to her flat. We left it at that. I was to drop by in 2 days, and hopefully Renee would be well enough to pose for a brief session. I walked Colette to her waiting taxi and rode with her to the nearest flower stand, where I asked the driver to stop. I am leaving you here, but please wait 1 minute. I bought a bouquet of pink roses and reminded the clerk, don't forget the big red bow. Handing them to Colette, I said, These are for Renee. I waved to her until the taxi was out of sight. Passers-by gave me rather strange looks. A tall man standing in the street, waving and smiling. As planned, I arrived on schedule for our third sitting. I brought wine, bread, meat, and vegetables, with some fruit for dessert. Renee, all bundled up, was happy to see me. She sat quiet, went out to do some shopping. We repeated the sitting at Colette's flat 4 more times. Each evening, Colette preparing dinner, and Renee going to bed shortly before my departure. On the day of the seventh sitting, I was delighted to find Renee completely over her cold. Colette was bubbling with enthusiasm, busy doing things around her flat, washing some of Renee's school clothes, ironing, and preparing vegetables. I could smell something baking in the oven. She was busy with her projects and didn't interfere with my painting of Renee. Renee was wearing a white shirt with a dark flowered skirt and a button down sweater. She stood for nearly 3 hours with 4 rest periods and a few hugs from Colette. Renee, my most wonderful model, the painting is finished, I announced. She stood beside me and said, Monsieur Keane, is that really me standing in that dark alley? Yes, I smiled. It's really you. Mama, Mama, come look. Colette walked across the room with one hand on my shoulder and one hand on Renee's. She paused and looked, not speaking for what seemed an eternity. It is so sad, so very sad. Then she threw her arms around me and gave me a quick kiss, our first, and said, Walter, I like it very much. I had been so totally consumed with my work that afternoon that I hadn't realized it was raining. When did it begin? I asked Colette. About an hour ago, she replied. I've been listening to the weather reports on the radio in the kitchen. It's expected to rain all night and into tomorrow. While we were having dinner, I turned my easel so that we could see my finished painting, while we consumed with relish a gourmet creation of Colette's. We could hear the rain on the windows and see an occasional flash of lightning. The storm had intensified. Dessert was coffee and a cake with a single lighted candle on it. On the cake were the words, 1 month together. This brought on a hug and the second kiss. Soon Renee said, Mama, I'm sleepy. Maybe I bit off too much. I was hoping it was over here. Colette excused herself. I must put my little darling to bed. Good night, Monsieur Walter. Good night, my beautiful model. A moment later, Renee came running back and said, Oh, Monsieur Keane, you have finished the painting of me. Now you will be gone when I return each day from school. Please keep coming back. I smiled and assured her that I would. I was putting things in order, getting ready to leave, when Colette emerged from the bedroom and went directly to the kitchen for another bottle of wine. She opened it and urged me to join her on the sofa. Do you know many of the street girls? She asked, after we had toasted one another with the first glass. A lot of them come around and talk with me while I'm painting. I realized it was the oldest question of all time, but stupid me, I asked, how did you become a prostitute? Colette answered matter-of-factly, about 2 years ago, my husband was killed in an automobile accident. After our savings were gone, I put Renee in a half-day school and took a part-time job. With what little money I could earn, I could hardly pay the rent, but our food and clothes for my daughter. Then one day, while I was in the vegetable market, I met a girl named Gigi. She invited me to join her for a coffee at the corner cafe. We talked a bit about our lives. She had run the gamut, the whorehouses, the telephone call system, and then she was a lady of the evening. She told me a few things about what she did and showed me a scar around her eye from some drunk bastard who blamed her because he couldn't get an erection. It was a bad scar. She had another scar on her shoulder from some other weirdo. After those injuries, Gigi became a lady of the evening because it was a little safer. She told me that she often met interesting men away from home who wanted a little fun before they had to go home to their wives and family problems. The wild tales the men would tell, if their wives heard them, they would whack it off of them in their sleep one night. Okay. Gigi joked. She urged me to come out with her that night. She said she'd show me how it was done. She said it was better than dying of boredom, and you get paid for it. She was out there nearly every night. I was reluctant. It was something I had never considered, but there was the ever-present need of money. To conceal my confusion, I excused myself and explained it was time to pick up Renee at school. Gigi said, Meet me tomorrow and let's have another talk. I considered the possibilities. If Gigi would get 50 francs a night, and if I did it 2 nights a week, I could earn enough money to pay the rent, buy food, and have a bit left over for clothing, and a theater ticket on occasion. My new world, my first night. I was with Gigi. I thought to myself, if I give it away, I'm a lady. If I sell it, I'm a whore. Gigi explained what to look for and what to say. It all boiled down to how to find a man who was safe. That was important because of my concern for Renee. What would happen to her without me? Possibly. That made me more cautious than necessary. I was very careful and got home early every night. The first time out, I must have been a near miss. However, he was a young foreigner and about as experienced as I. After a few nights out, I managed to swallow my pride and get a little confidence. I asked Colette why she didn't work in a house or have a telephone and be on call instead of working the street. When a girl works in a house, she's in a sitting room with several other girls. The madam brings in a customer. He looks the girls over, some flirt with him, others are more shy. He makes his choice, and the girl has to go upstairs with him. He may be crude, vulgar, drunk, even cruel. Yet, if he points to you, he gets you. Your job as one of the girls is to go upstairs. On the streets, I only talk to a man who looks good, a gentleman, clean, well dressed, and well mannered. It's much safer. Gigi taught me to spot a big spender, a man with two back pockets, an American design. Gigi said, "You could really put it to him. He will pay dearly." But wasn't it difficult, humiliating? I persisted. Nothing can be humiliating. Nothing can be humiliating after what I've gone through. Her beautiful eyes clouded. I took Colette's hand. "I never knew my father," she began, her voice soft and hesitant. "He was killed in North Africa working on a construction job. My mother received just enough money to last for 2 years. Then she had to find work. She did her best for me. There were several babysitters. My uncle Maurice, and on occasion her boyfriends would care for me. The day after my 14th birthday, I arrived home from school to be greeted by Jake, her current beau. He welcomed me, pouring a glass of wine, saying, 'Happy birthday, sorry I'm a day late.' He handed me a present all done up in a fancy box with ribbon and a birthday card. 'Go ahead,' he urged me, 'open it.' I was so excited as I untied the ribbon very carefully so as not to tear the paper. Then I slid the lid off the box. Inside were a beautiful slip, and underneath that a nightgown. Oh, how elegant they were! I remember them still. Jake invited me to have another glass of wine, and then suggested I try them on. I went into the bedroom and came out wearing the slip. As I walked into the living room, Jake handed me another glass of wine. He proposed a toast to a very beautiful girl. "Oh, I loved my slip, thank you," I said to him so innocently. Jake suggested, "Try on the nightgown." Obediently, I returned to the bedroom, not knowing that Jake was close behind. As I took off my slip and was reaching for the nightgown, Jake grabbed me. "I want to kiss you." "Oh, no. I want to kiss you, little one," he hissed. I clutched the nightgown, trying to cover myself, but Jake pulled it away from me. Staggering in his half-drunk state, he tried to hug me. I began to scream. He let go of the nightgown, and I was able to pull free from his grasp and run to the front door. As I pulled it open, I encountered a neighbor lady who'd heard me scream. I was crying. Jake had scratches on his right hand and one on his face. The neighbor said she was going to call the police. Jake ran out and never came back. When Mother came home from work, the neighbor lady told her what had happened. She was furious and tried to comfort me, explaining then a little more of life in the big world, things I hadn't known before. Unfortunately, this was not the end of my encounters with Mother's boyfriends. 2 years later, when I was nearly 16, Pierre came into the apartment while Mother was away and I was in the shower. He was holding a half-empty bottle of gin in his hand and appeared very drunk. He walked into the bathroom and locked the door behind him. I began to scream, "Get out of here, I'll call the police." He slapped me and twisted my right arm behind me. I scratched him and pulled his hair. He struck me again, knocking me to the floor. I bit and screamed and scratched, but it did no good. Trembling, sobbing hysterically, I had my first sexual experience. When it was over, he threatened to kill me if I told anyone. Get out of here, you ugly man. I hate you, I screamed. You'll be dead if you tell anyone, he warned me, slamming the door as he left the apartment. Shivering and shaking, I mean, she was awful cordial. Get out of here, you ugly man, I hate you. Shivering and shaking from shock, I drew myself a bath and sat in it for what seemed to have been hours, physically and emotionally exhausted. I finally got out and dried myself off. Fearful that he might return, I locked the bedroom door and climbed into bed. Of all the nights to be late, Mother did not return home until 9 o'clock that evening. As she entered the flat, she called out for me. I couldn't bring myself to answer. Finding the bedroom door locked, she knocked and called my name. I opened it and ran back to bed. Were you frightened, darling? Didn't Pierre give you the message that I was staying late for an office party? Her eyes widened as she saw the bruise on my face. What's wrong? What happened? I was so terrified of Pierre that I lied. Two girls bumped into me. I dropped my books and fell against the railing. I told my mother, poor baby, she cooed, applying a wet cloth to my face. It will go away. I'll fix you a nice dinner. No, mother, I insisted. I'm tired. I just want to sleep. Soon she went off to bed. The next morning we had breakfast together as usual. I went off to school, then she to work. Then 2 days later, mother ran into Pierre. She noticed that he had a scratch on his face and one on his hand. She remembered the half empty gin bottle at home and the bruise on my face. That night she asked me if I'd seen Pierre lately. Still fearful, I lied again. No. Are you sure, mother? The other day I came home from school and found the apartment a mess. Why is she calling? Okay. I wish you'd have the locks changed and never give your boyfriend's keys to our flat. Of course, mother put the pieces of the puzzle together. It was the end of her relationship with Pierre. That son of a bitch. I met Michael at a church party. It was love at first sight for both of us. He was just going into business. I was 18. We were married, and a year later we had our baby, Renee. I thought life was perfect, but how could I know that it would all end so soon? Michael was killed in an automobile accident when Renee was 2 years old. I held Colette in my arms for a long time, trying to think of something comforting to say. The rain was beating down above us. In the distance, we could hear the kitchen radio. It was the heaviest rain in 7 years. How he knew that, I don't know, but and was expected to last 2 more days, the announcer said. Reluctantly, I rose to my feet. I really must go now. Colette protested. Oh, not in this. You'll get soaked. It will be impossible to get a taxi in such heavy rain. Yes, yes. She sat close to. You know what's funny? Is today I was at the thrift store and it started the thunderstorm. And as soon as I walked up to the register, the lady goes, "Oh, somebody's sure gonna get wet tonight." And I was like, "Oh, what the fuck are you saying to me, man?" I said, "Yeah." She sat close to me, pouring another glass of wine. Won't you stay with me tonight? Where will I sleep? She pointed to the other bed, only 3 feet from Renee. Hello. Why do I feel like this is the same girl who comes here under a different name? You and I sleep in a bed that close to Renee. I was truly shocked. No, no, darling. I don't think it's wise. Putting her arms around me and kissing me again, she said, This is the first time you ever called me darling. I had long anticipated the warmth of her mouth, but not until this moment did I feel it against my lips in such a seductive way. Ma chérie, let's take the mattress off the bed. Oh, no. And onto the living room floor. We can sleep there. With a smile of approval, she moved about, removing her blouse and unhooking her skirt. I was singing in the shower. She came into the bedroom, or the bathroom, and with a soft towel, passionately dried my wet body. With a warm embrace, she whispered, "Hop into bed, my love. I'll be there soon." Colette had opened another bottle of wine and lit a candle near our bed. Could you imagine drinking 3 bottles of wine with one person? Colette had opened another bottle of wine and lit a candle near our bed. The light reflected in her eyes. Her face was so gentle and delicate, her tongue and hot lips so alive and sensuous, passionately seeking all the areas of my young body. I kissed her beautiful breasts. Oh no. Please don't get worse. Caressing her bottom and legs, stroking her soft dark hair. She reached for her wine glass and wanted to make a toast. Wait, so they're. Alright, I give up. She reached for her wine glass and wanted to make a toast to our togetherness. We sipped the wine. I poured some of the liquid on her lovely body and drank from her skin. Fill the glasses again, darling. What a wonderful feeling. I love it. She was a true Parisian. It was well into the morning when we finally fell asleep in each other's arms. While Renee was at school, Colette and I spent hours talking and making love. In the evenings, the three of us ate a leisurely dinner, told jokes or stories, and laughed. We were the family I had always wanted. The days came and went, and we were together. Happiness was everywhere, and life was suddenly all right. Minus the fact that you have a wife back at the fucking in America. And that's going to conclude this reading. What's that? 4 chapters? Please discuss. Hey, let's bone. Hey, you know what? Today, while I was getting ready to go to the dealership to get my car serviced, this fucking thing goes. The alarm finally went off. Maybe this thing is haunted. Talk amongst yourself. I must get some crackers. I must get some crackers. Look at those children. Those poor children. Whoa, what happened? It's that dark? Oh, there it is. This is a story for the hurting room. Look this guy up, this Walter Keane guy. Apparently, you've seen those big-eyed. Just look up Walter Keane paintings and you'll see the big-eyed children who are like on velvet canvases. Apparently those are worth money. Oh, oh, Jesus. Goddamn cheese don't want to open. I'm gonna have my cheese, motherfucker. I will have my cheese. Told you I'd have my goddamn cheese. Message retracted. What'd she say? What did you retract? Cheese? Apparently Tim Burton made a movie about it, Big Eyes or something like that. Is that a baby or a kid? What? Oh, those are demons. Those are the starving children of the world. Right. And their tanks, and their bombs, and their guns. Oh. Tonic water? Hell yeah. I'm a cracker. I gotta have my crackers and cheese. Somebody's gonna get wet tonight. Thought they said never drink the water in Mexico. There, have some crackers. Isn't that a saying? Don't drink the water in Mexico? Never drink the water in Mexico. As a rule, you should not drink tap water in Mexico. Generally, Mexico's water is purified at the source, but the distribution system may allow the water to be contaminated en route to the tap. Drinking tap water intentionally or by accident carries a high risk of getting ill. Once you've realized that you have made a mistake, it's important to go to a pharmacy immediately and ask for their recommendations. That's fucking crazy. The water in Cancun is full of solid particulates of multiple sources, including wastewater. It is also laden with minerals. It is treated with chemicals by the water company to make it usable for bathing, cleaning, washing, and brushing your teeth. I think that means teeth. And brushing your teeth. It is not suitable for drinking. I just don't get why it's becoming contaminated. Why don't you fucking clean it? So what's the point of purifying if you're... Why even purify this shit? You're not going to clean it. Makes zero sense, honestly. What do you got? Knocking where? In your head? Yeah, looks like you're gonna die. You did.